Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next edition of the Manning Up video show. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. He has been the senior coach of the Thomastown Football Club in the Northern Footy League. He was also the senior coach of the Oak Park Football Club, in fact, leading their reserves to a premiership. And he is the current senior assistant coach to Dave Connell at the Tullamarine Football Club. Welcome, Benny Chapman.
G'day, Ash. How are you, mate?
Oh, mate, living the dream in these ISO times. Spending all my money on the punt yesterday. All the good races are coming in now, so it's that time of year. Normally I make money, but I've got a feeling I might be donating a bit like yourself, probably.
Always donating on the punt, mate. You know that.
Now, you're a mad Collingwood man, mate. Let's get straight into last night's game. Talk to me. What happened to the Pies?
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing, wasn't it? Obviously, after last week, it was going to go one or two ways. I dare say they were either going to come out and be really competitive and build on that momentum they had last week, or they were going to have a bit of a letdown. And obviously, it's pretty evident early in the game that the letdown was going to happen. And unfortunately, it was a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. But, at the end of the day, Geelong were very good. So as bad as the Pies were, Geelong were good. So it sets up a really entertaining next couple of weeks, I reckon.
Yeah, well, I said last week on the show that history sort of tells you that the teams that get beaten the first week of the finals quite often bounce back. And I was pretty confident that Geelong would win, but I certainly didn't expect, or I don't think anybody saw what happened last night coming. I mean, you'd be a bit of a genius tipster if you predicted that. But Collingwood, which have been so good all year defensively and for such a long time defensively, just fell down. The amount of uncontested marks Geelong were able to take inside 50 in the first half was mind-blowing, really. They just seemed to be at all sixes and sevens, and Geelong played a really good brand of footy, and it sets up for a cracking preliminary final game last year. A game next week. I'm just on Collingwood's season. Good, bad, underachieved. What do you think?
Oh, look, given the injuries and stuff that they had, and that the adversity that they went through over the course of the year, like everybody else, it's probably a pass, just a pass, I reckon. Obviously, from where they've been.
After round 3 or 4, they were favourite for the flag, the Pies.
Yeah, they were. Then they got injuries to a couple of key personnel. Obviously, they had off-field issues. In the end, they were fortunate to make the 8. It looked a bit dicey there towards the latter part of the year that they might not have even made the 8. So to scrape in the end and then to win a final, particularly in Perth, I think that's what they can hang their hat on. The key for them, though, is, I think they need more potency forward. They've got to try and chase it forward, in my opinion.
Yeah. Who have you got your heart set on? In an ideal world, who would you get?
I'd love Jeremy Cameron. Throw it everyone else.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. I think he'd be good for Collingwood. Either him or Ben Brown. Ben Brown leads up at the footy, so I think he'd be good for Collingwood the way they play.
Yeah, I think with it's interesting. You look at the 4 sides that are left in the prelims, and I can't think of an injury between them. You look at all those sides. Richmond's got Soldo maybe, but other than that, I can't think of any of those sides that have got a really significant injury. So it just shows you, you've got to be the best team, but you've also got to have a bit of luck along the way. You look at Collingwood with Howe and Sidebottom unavailable, and West Coast had Yeo and a couple of other guys unavailable. It just shows you that it's a big advantage if you're healthy and fit coming into the finals. The other semi-final on the weekend was a pretty predictable result. I think, as I said, St Kilda had 3 key outs in Carlisle. I thought Ryder was a massive out, and obviously Ben Long out, but Richmond just flexed their muscles.
They're a good side, Richmond. They're a good side, mate. I still think they'll win.
Yeah, well, last week on the show, I said that I didn't think the loss had hurt them. The situation hasn't changed. They still needed to win 3 games. They've won one of those. They've won it easily. They played Richmond. They actually won by playing an un-Richmond way of winning, which just shows their versatility. Lynch back into the side was massive. I mean, he's just contested the ball is amazing. He gets all this negative criticism, but there's been plenty of champions in the game that played on the edge. Blokes like Wayne Carey, Barry Hall, Gary Ablett, Tony Lockett. The list goes on. They all played with that hard edge. And as a coach, you're a coach. You don't mind those sort of guys as long as they're not getting suspended for big games.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so I think the way Richmond played, I think I still think they're the team to beat. You know, they're going to have to probably beat Port Adelaide, obviously in Adelaide, and then maybe potentially Brisbane in Brisbane, which is a hard ask. But if anyone can do it, they're probably the side that can do it. So, anything else you want to add on the AFL, buddy?
No, mate. We can get off Collingwood as quick as we can, mate, can we?
Get off Collingwood as quick as you can. What about a tip for the Brownlow medal, mate? Can anyone knock off Lachie Neale?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. I think Brisbane's won enough games, and he's been dominant in enough of those games to pile big votes. And as you know, midfielders get a lot of votes, mate. So I'd be very surprised if he doesn't win it.
All right, no worries. Okay, well, we'll leave the AFL for there, and we'll go on to this week's edition of Rants from the Recliner. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Rants from the Recliner. Today I would like to talk about some of the rule changes in the AFL and how they've negatively impacted on the game. At the moment, everybody's talking about things like opening up the game and getting less congestion. Well, some of the rules, especially around the ruck situations, are some of the reasons why we have congestion. Some of the rule changes have been absolutely ridiculous. For example, at the moment, every time there's a boundary throw-in or a ball up, the umpire needs to wait for the ruckman to get there. Then he has to ask which ruckman are going up before he throws the ball up. Just throw the ball in. There's 4 boundary umpires and 3 field umpires every game. So there should be no waiting around. As soon as there's a ball up or a throw-in, just throw the ball in. If the ruckman aren't there, it doesn't matter. The rule shouldn't be that you have to nominate. Any 2 players can go up, one from either team, and if a third player goes up, you pay a free kick. It's pretty simple. Too often at the moment we have players, the boundary umpires, waiting 5 and 7 seconds for players to run all the way from across the ground, which only means we're waiting for 14 or 16 players to get there. Throw the ball in while there's 4 or 6, congestion problem solved. The second rule revolving ruckman that creates more congestion is not allowing the third man up. Back in the 90s, North Melbourne revolutionised this with Adam Simpson consistently being the third man up. Then Adam Goodes became a specialist at it, and in recent years Geelong have exercised it with Mark Blitzars. Then for some reason they changed this rule, probably to protect ruckmen who cop the odd knock in their hip pointer. Big deal. It's ridiculous. Why change the rule? The third man up rule is very advantageous to opening up the game. Firstly, if the player that goes up can smash the ball outside of the congestion, thus meaning his players can run under the ball. Adam Simpson and North Melbourne revolutionised this in the 90s, and they were great at it. The other thing about the third man up is if the third man goes up and actually doesn't contest the ball or doesn't win the hit out, the ball often falls to his direct opponent, thus giving them a clear possession and they're able to kick the ball forward, once again easing congestion. Those of you that are old enough to remember the 1989 Grand Final might remember one of the great all-time Grand Final goals when Gary Ablett Sr. jumped third man up in the ruck with Scott McGuinness hanging off him, kicked the ball as soon as he hit the ground from 35 metres out in one of the great Grand Final goals. Those sort of things can't happen now because we're not allowed to have the third man up. Absolutely ridiculous. Both of these things, the third man up and the nomination rule, if they brought them back, we would be fine. The AFL is consumed with changing the rules. You tell me in what other sport in the world has as many rule changes as the AFL. In fact, the AFL has more rule changes than every other sport put together. Soccer, they never change the rules. Basketball, they never change the rules. Tennis, they never change the rules. It's only AFL. Why do we insist on changing the rules? While I'm at it, here's another ruck rule that I don't understand. Why are ruckmen allowed to jump up with their knee, put their knee into their opposition player's chest, sometimes neck, and tap the ball out? I love it. It's great. But you're allowed to do that, yet you can't use your hand or your arm to push into the opposition's chest to protect the space. Dustin Martin does it all over the field and everybody lauds him and says he's the don't argue king. And he should be entitled to do that. It's a show of strength. Tom Hawkins, Charlie Dixon, Tom Lynch all do it in the forward line to protect the space. They put their arm out into the opposition player's chest, they protect the area, they take the mark. Why can't ruckman do it? Why is it a free kick when a ruckman pushes an opposition player in the chest and the umpire pays a stupid free kick? the thing that really annoys me with the ruckman, and it must annoy you too as a spectator, the ball gets thrown in from a boundary throw-in, the two ruckmen grapple, the whistle goes, and the 15 players that are all around the stoppage all look at the umpire because nobody has a clue whose free kick it is. Just let the players play, stop changing the rules, and let's get back to the AFL the way it should be played. Rant over. See you next week. Thank you. Okay, Benny, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a bit about local footy. So you've coached seniors at a couple of teams, Thomastown and Oak Park, and now currently at Tullamarine. What's the situation down at Tullamarine at the moment? You're under Dave Connell. How's things tracking down there at Tulla?
Yeah, we're relatively healthy, mate. Our list, we've been able to maintain most of our list, so that's been encouraging. We've brought a few in over the last couple of months, so we think we're going to be, we'll be ultra competitive next year. Naturally, as you know, footy's still a long way away. It seems like a long time since we've played, and it's still a long time since we're going to play again. So our list is we're pretty healthy, and we're fairly bullish about what next season holds for us. Naturally, the same as everyone else, though, mate. Everyone starts 0-0. So, we think we've got a list that's going to help us compete. And with any luck, a little bit of luck, as you said, with injuries and stuff like that, we think we'll be, around the mark again.
Well, it's interesting with COVID yesterday. I posted something on Facebook yesterday about I'm very concerned with the way the case numbers are tracking at the moment. I'm very concerned with how we're looking at this. I can see this easily going 3 or 6 more months, and that's going to mean no cricket and potentially another football season down the gurgler. So it's very tough times for local footy clubs and cricket clubs at the moment trying to generate money. Most of their sponsors of local footy clubs are, small business owners and, cafes and bars and shops and these sort of things, and they're the people that are struggling most. So the money in local sport's going to be very difficult to generate. And as you said, I think it's a 50-50 whether we even get a season up and running again next year the way things are going. But that's for people more important than us to discuss. The coach you coach under at the moment, Dave Connell, I obviously coached Tullamarine for 5 years, and we never had a huge budget. We're always able to be competitive. We probably didn't compete with the top sides in terms of spending, but he seems to have an innate knack of being able to recruit guys. When I coached, I found that one of the more difficult things to do was to recruit. Tell me about some of the things that you found difficult, most difficult when you were coaching seniors.
Probably the same, Ash. I think the recruiting side is the hardest thing. And trying to attract players to your club first, and then B, trying to negotiate were probably two of the biggest challenges I face as a coach. And not having a direct footy manager at either of the two senior clubs that I coached, majority of the recruiting was done by yourself as a senior coach, the same as you did. So that was a big challenge. And I think, given the way that footy was tracking up until, this year with the salary cap being cut in half, before there was a salary cap, some of the figures that players were demanding were ridiculous for what their CV read. I think the salary caps probably helped that a little bit, and brought that back a bit. Next year we'll do that again. But again, mate, the salary cap's a number on a bit of paper, technically.
Well, I'm amazed. I don't know. I'm not privy to the spending at Tullamarine, but the job that Dave Connell's doing to get some of the guys he's getting is he obviously has a gift in that area, because I found that difficult. Although when I coached Glenroy back in 2008, we won the grand final, I was able to recruit guys like Johnny Kent, who kicked 100 goals, Lee O'Neill, Danny Campbell, Trent Ogston came as assistant coach from Strathmore, Tommy Delaney, Adam Sayers. If you try to recruit the calibre of those guys now, it cost you a fortune. So I don't really know how. Glenroy didn't have a whole lot of money in that time, and we were probably lucky that a few guys were loyal to me, and I was also lucky to get a few guys across the line for probably less than they could have got elsewhere. But I will tell you one funny story about recruiting and some of the things you deal with as a footy coach. When I was at Tulla, my first year at Tulla, the under-18s had a pretty good side and actually got beat in the grand final. They had guys like Daniel Sinnott, Blair Cronin, Dylan Ramsey, Callum Ronaldson, Luke Larson. they had a pretty good side. And Andy Fisher was the president. He rang me up and he said, listen, I've got a young bloke. He's thinking about leaving. I want to have a chat with him. And I'd seen him play quite a few games in the under-18s, but I hadn't had much to do with him. So we go to the meeting and his dad turns up. And I won't use the young fella's name because I just don't think we need to go down that road. But so he turns up with his dad. And this is what you got to deal with. And you would have dealt with this being a coach. So we sit in the meeting and I said, okay, young fella, so what's it going? He says, well, I want to go to Keilor. I said, okay, what do you want to go to Keilor for? Mick McGuan's a coach. I want Mick McGuan to coach me. And my mind's ticking over and I'm thinking, listen, young fella, Mick McGuan's not coaching you, mate. But you can't say that to the young fella. You got to be very diplomatic. And he's saying, oh, Mick McGuan's told me that if I play at Keilor, you know, I'm going to have scouts looking at me and, you know, he'll help me get drafted the next year and all this. And I'm thinking, well, you've played B grade under-18s at Tulla. You've come about 8th in the best and fairest. You're an okay player. I'm thinking maybe you could play half a dozen games at Tulla. I'm not sure you're going to get a game at Keilor, but I've got to find a diplomatic way of telling him this. So I said to him, you'd realise that Mick McGuan doesn't coach the reserves. He says, oh, I won't be playing reserves. He says, Mick McGuan's told me that I'll be playing in the seniors. And I said, well, Mick McGuan can tell you whatever he likes. Once you're there, the reality is, you know, it's going to be pretty tough. Anyway, long story short, I said, well, what's Mick McGuan offered? And he says, oh, he's offered me, you know, whatever it was. And I said, well, I'll offer you, you know, this much, which was less. I said, but, you know, I'll guarantee you that, you know, if the opportunity arises, I'll give you a few games in the seniors. Anyway, long story short, he decides to go to Keilor. So these are back in the days when the Good Friday games had just started, Keilor versus Strathmore. So I turned up with a couple of mates to watch the game and I'm watching the reserves and this young fella's not running around in the reserves. I'm thinking, oh, have I got this wrong? Is this kid in the seniors? You know, what have I done? You know, I've stuffed this up because normally I think I'm a reasonable judge of footy talent. Anyway, quarter time I walk out to the huddle and he's walking out on the ground with a couple of his mates. And I said to him, hey, I said, how you going, mate? He said, oh, yeah, good. I said, oh, you're not in the reserves? I said, you get picked in the seniors? He said, no, I didn't get a game in the reserves. So this is the guy who's telling me that he's going to get drafted and Mick McGuan's going to coach him. And he couldn't get a game in Keilor's reserves. So I said to him, I said, why don't you come back to Tulla? He said, oh, I'd love to come back to Tulla. He said, I'll play for 300. I said, mate, you can play for 50 like everybody else. And if you get a game, we'll assess at the end of the year and see you go. But it's just amazing when you're trying to recruit blokes, the ambition and the ability that some of these guys get confused. And his dad was fully supportive. He's like, yeah, we're going to get drafted and we're going to go here and we're going to go there. So amazing. What about yourself, Benny? Any recruiting or any stories from your coaching that might interest the viewers?
I've got a pretty funny story, mate. When I was coaching Oak Park, we're playing at home one day. Anyway, David Byrne was my runner. I don't know if you know Burns. He's well known around the EDFL. So he was my runner. Anyway, as you know, we've got the elevated coaches box at Oak Park. So I send him a message. I say, you know, out you go and deliver the message. So he runs past Jesse Hemmons. Jesse Hemmons has got the ball on the wing half forward flank. So he runs past Hemo and he yells out to Hemo. He goes, Hemo. So Hemo turns around and handballs.
What for the
Burnsy? To Burnsy. And then obviously
so
the ball gets turned over.
Did he grab it and pump it forward or whatever?
No, he didn't. He didn't grab it. But so anyway, so Hemo, I don't know how well you know Hemo, but Hemo can get a little bit hot-headed. So Hemo's lost the plot a bit. And he's yelling at Burnsy, what are you calling for? Burnsy's going, what are you handballing at me for? So, yeah, that was a pretty funny story. So we made Burnsy, we still joke about it now, Burnsy and I, but we used to tell him, when you go out there, if someone's got the footy, don't say anything until you get past that person and you're nowhere near the play, so you can't get involved in the play. So, yeah, that was a pretty funny story.
When I was coaching Glenroy Reserves, Scotty Condon was my runner. And somebody did something wrong, and I sent her and I said, Condo, go and tell him to effing well do this, effing well. And I just sprayed the bloke. And Condo got about halfway and he turned around, he called back to me and he said, hey, do you want me to put a positive spin on that when I get out there? And I said, you do what you effing well like, just get out and tell him. So, but just with the coaching, just with another coaching story that some of the listeners will be interested. Again, I won't use the guy's name, but when I was coaching Lansfield, Brett Pitts got me. We needed a ruckman, and Brett Pitts got me onto a guy who was, I think he was playing at Glenroy at the time, and I rang him up. And I said, oh, listen, mate, you know, I'm at Lansfield. We need a ruckman. You know, how much you on? We can offer you this. We can offer you that. And he says, oh, look, I'm pretty right. He says, I'm tossing up between Keilor and Strathmore. And I said, and this was a guy who'd played, you know, a bit of Glenroy reserves, a bit of Glenroy seniors. I said, Strathmore and Keilor. I said, what are you going to go down there and play reserves for? He says, oh, no, not reserves. He says, I'll be playing seniors. Now, I don't know if you remember, but at the time, Strathmore's ruckman was a guy named Hamish McIntosh, who played about 150 AFL games. And Keilor's ruckman was Big Brown, who played at Richmond and won the comp medal. So I tried to say to the young fella very diplomatically, I said, do you really think you're going to get a game down there at either of those clubs with those two ruckmen? Oh, yeah, they've guaranteed me a game. They've told me I'm going to get 400 a game or whatever it was. And just the stories that some clubs tell players just in order to get them down there, knowing full well that once they've got them signed, there's not a lot they can do about it. So, you know, you're trying to deal with these guys and you've got to be diplomatic. But some of the stories that I've heard over the years are just amazing. So, look, Benny, we could talk all day. Is there anything else you've got for me, or are you still crying over Collingwood's demise last night?
Nah, mate, I'll move on pretty quickly. So there's 2 weeks of footy to go. I can sit back now and be impartial and watch them. In between, turn me focus now to the races, mate. So with any luck, I might be able to do a bit more form and have a more positive result than I've had over the course of ISO, mate. It hasn't been great. Doesn't give you much to do on a Saturday besides obviously sit down, watch the races and punt. So.
Well, I'm hoping once the footy season's over is maybe get a couple of guys on to talk about the races and obviously, it's normally a big time of year for me at the races, so I'm going to miss that. But look, thanks very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Good luck on the punt for the next few weeks. Hopefully, you don't do too much damage. And if we manage to get a season up and going next year, good luck to you down at Tulla. And thanks for being on the show.
Anytime, mate. Thanks, Ash.
All right, no worries. Thanks, guys. Okay, that's all for this week's edition of the show. Make sure you tune in next week when we've got another special guest and we're able to talk preliminary finals. Thanks very much. See ya.